Do you realize how much of your childhood impacts your relationship with self and others? Have you been in a relationship where you felt like you muted yourself? Or have you been in a relationship where the other person seems to be so loud that you don't quite know what you need and what you want for yourself? If any of those questions you're looking for answers for, our next guest will explore that and so much more on Am I Crazy with your host, me, LaShasta Bell. Hey, come on in, come on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Am I Crazy with LaShasta Bell, your mental health expert. Our next guest coming up is Kevin Bell Sr. Yep, you got it. It's the Mister. The little Mister was here last month, and now the Mister is here this month. Kevin has his master's degree in business management. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a brother, and most of all, he's a man that has chosen to prioritize his mental health journey. Join us when we come back. We offer face-to-face and virtual counseling throughout the state of Texas. www.ichoosemecounseling.com. All right, so I'm so glad you could join us today at Am I Crazy? And I just really thank you for being here and being willing to share your mental health journey, which of course, because we started this journey together so many years ago, your journey encompassed my journey and vice versa. And it's the day after Valentine's Day. Lots of people think about relationships and love and couples. And we want to make sure that one of the things that we kind of highlight, and we will highlight, is the importance of loving yourself and having a relationship with yourself first. You know, February is also Teen Dating Violence Month, and understanding our journey started as teenagers. And while it didn't encompass violence, we now know, looking back, that having a teenage relationship at a particular age, that it does need some type of guidelines and or boundaries, we could say, that helps you to learn like how to be in relationship ongoingly. So when you think about your journey in mental health, where would you start? Like, where would you want to start to talk? Because I know it's so much. Like, I don't even know. So I'm gonna toss the hat to you and be like, here, tag you in, and have you start off our conversation.
Well, again, thank you for having me. I think it starts with boundaries. And, back when I was a teenager, I really didn't even understand boundaries, less known, what it meant besides a definition. I think holding up an image was mostly what I kind of was about as a teenager, with playing sports and different stuff of that nature, wanting to be the popular kid or being the most popular kid or whatnot. So I think learning how to love myself, it was always putting up some type of image of portraying to be who I really wasn't, because I didn't know who I was. I was still trying to find who I was as a teenager, Right.
And a lot of times we don't realize, or the people around us don't realize, that when you're good at so many different things, it doesn't allow you to have space to learn and grow at other things. So like you said, you new boundaries, or the boundaries you knew was inbounds and out of bounds, basketball, football, and track, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and let's not forget baseball, because baseball was in there somewhere too. Yeah. That because you were good at all of these sports, that you really didn't have the opportunity to explore anything, because you had, like you said, you kind of had this image that other people created for you to uphold. And I know the journey. I didn't feel like it was a image, so to speak, but all I knew was what I knew and what I saw. And as you went through high school at what point did you realize, like, this is exhausting, or was it high school? Was it college? When was it that you realized, like, this is exhausting to carry this image that I don't even necessarily want to carry?
It definitely wasn't in high school and not in college either. I think it takes some time to really let things resonate with you when you have to really process stuff, you know, and I really didn't really understand that until I went to therapy. And we're talking about in my 30s. So we're not even talking about teenage years or 20s. We're talking about 30s, you know. So that means I had a career job as a coach and just still learning, you know. And I went through a lot of different channels at that time, from a boyfriend to a dad to a husband. So those are a lot of different channels and a lot of different variables. So I learned throughout that process. So it wasn't until my 30s until I really realized, okay, something needs to change here, because a lot of different things that was happening in relationships and marriage, I didn't even know how to be in a relationship, you know, unless I'm trying to set some boundaries to be in a relationship. What am I trying to set? You know, what am I trying to put in place to say this is what I need? Because I really didn't know.
Right. It makes sense. And, you know, I get it. Even when I look on my side of the coin, I finished my master's in counseling at 27 and still didn't have a clear understanding of how to be in a relationship and have healthy boundaries in a relationship. Because the research says, like, you know, 0 to 3 is when we really develop those bonds and start to understand and get an understanding of how to be in relationships. And that is the foundation, and we grow from that. And so a lot of what we didn't have or did have came from the relationships that we saw in our lives growing up as kids. And either we mimic it exactly, consciously or subconsciously, or we try to do the total opposite, but then we end up on another extreme. So it's like, oh, I ain't gonna do this like mama and them did, or such and such and them did. But you end up on a whole nother extremity, which is kind of, you know, just as bad.
Well, I think that was just that was my playing ground to kind of what my parents did or what they didn't do, you know. So you really didn't have I didn't really have a stepping stone to be like, okay, hey, they did this like this, so I should do it like this. It was all a learning experience. And since I was learning it with you, I was learning it like we was brother and sister, we was family, but we was boyfriend and girlfriend. So, you know, when we was in our younger relationship, it wasn't to the point that, you know, I didn't want to disappoint anything, because the love that we had was like family, you know, and we was learning together. So I was nonchalant about a whole lot of things, which oftentimes things were growing inside that I really didn't know what to do with. And at that point, now I got myself into some extracurricular activities.
I like the way you phrase that, extracurricular activities. But yeah, you make good points that we've learned a lot of stuff together. And we've talked about this before, the absence of a father for me, and where I feel like is a prime time where a girl needs her father, and that's the teenage years, to teach how to be in relationship. And that's what relationship, you know, research shows that too, that, you know, pattern of relationship is, you know, a son to a mother and a daughter to a father, because that parent helps to teach the child how to be in relationship with the opposite sex. And so without that, yeah, it was just a clean slate, and whatever went on the slate, whatever happened, whatever we did together, that was what was on the slate. And there was things that was like, okay, we know this is not right, but at the same time, how do we make it right, and what is right? Like, we didn't even define things. We just kind of was in the relationship and going speed ahead without taking time to put some fundamental things in place. And I've now learned years later that nonchalant attitude that you would carry allowed me to just treat you any kind of way, like emotionally and verbally. And not to say like I'm verbally abusive or anything like that.
Right.
but it didn't create a space for me to factor in, like, how does Kevin feel about this? Because, like, man, it don't bother me either way. When you get that response from a person so much, then you don't have space to filter in. Now my hair and my makeup, like, I knew where you stood on that early in life, and so I would think, like, I don't know if he'll like this. But that was all superficial, external. But internally, you didn't really allow for a space to tap into your feelings.
Right. I think, and that went on with our relationship with the kids, the girls, because it's an old saying that you teach people how to treat you. And I think what happened is through all that time, I was teaching you guys that nothing bothered me. Because, Dad gonna get it done, or, Kevin gonna get it done, or my husband gonna get it done. Whatever you guys was calling me at the time, that's what it was about. Because that's what I learned growing up, is to just financially take care of the family. And that's really all it was. I didn't get the other side of relationships and waking up saying, I love you, or, it wasn't until recent years, probably late in my 20s, early 30s, that, my mom was like, when we get out the phone, I love you. So, I knew she loved me, because she worked 2-3 jobs trying to give me everything that, that I thought I wanted. But at the same time, that's what I knew. I knew how to be financially stable and keep a house and a roof over our head. So with that being said, I taught you guys how to treat me that way. So in my 30s, let's fast forward it, and now we're talking about therapy, and what one of the things was to, hey, am I obligated to be with my wife, or am I in love with my wife? And those were the questions going into therapy, and that's when the processing started happening. And then now I can understand why some of these things were happening, because what would happen is that the way I was getting treated, I wasn't letting you know, so you didn't know. So, if you don't tell anybody thing, how can I give you guys a chance to fix it? Whether it's you, Brianna, or Money, or, how can I give you...
Or Kevin Jr.
Or Kevin Jr. later on.
Is he exempt?
He probably exempt, but but that's a whole nother show. But so I think that's mostly what it was, is me, not teaching you guys how to treat you, because I wasn't expressing how I felt, inside as a person. The only thing that I would do, I'd rather go talk to another woman and tell her how I felt. So basically, like they say, you're giving them the recipe, right?
Mm-hmm. The Cliff Notes, like I said. If you give them the Cliff Notes, hell yeah, they're going to pass the test. But that's a whole... It's a whole nother thing, because that's really what it is. But I can remember you telling stories, because, how the kids like to hear childhood stories and stuff. But I remember you telling several stories around fights in the neighborhood and how it was addressed, and when you were scared, how it was addressed. It's like, suck it up, get back out there and fight. And if you don't execute, then there's negative consequences. So even when you were scared and being bullied and things like that, there was not a space for you to express your feelings almost without negative consequence.
Right. Yeah, when we grew up in Houston for part of my life, and I was 10 years old when I got the first gun pulled on me, right? So, that's the type of environment that I was in, and it don't matter if the kid was 13 or 14. If he hit you, you hit him back, and you don't shy away from anything like that. So I think it's not no get up and dust yourself off type thing. It's like you fight, or that's it. Or else your big brother, your big sister go beat you up. Or go back outside, punk. You need to fight. That's just what it was. So I think that all that play a role in keeping those feelings inside, not being able to express yourself. Because if you cried when you was a kid, when your mom left, you a punk. If you go outside and somebody punch you in the nose and you come back in crying, even though the kid 6 foot tall and you 4'11", it didn't matter. You was a punk.
And you got punched in your nose. I mean,
yeah.
I think naturally, not that I've ever been punched in the nose, but it seems like naturally, if you punched in your nose, it's going to cause some tear. Even if you're not really crying, that's a whole a whole experience, within itself, and to experience that as a child. And so all those things translate into our relationship. And even with a counseling degree, even with being a therapist, because part of this time when you're in your 30s, then depending on what part of your 30s, I'm in my 30s, I'm doing the whole thing out loud. When you're in a situation, it's so very hard to pull in all the factors that cause disruption or disorder or whatever, disrespect in a relationship. So even though, like, okay, I could sit with couples and know this, and this, when I got home, the fact of you seeing somebody being shot at the age of 4, having a gun being pulled on at the age of 10, I don't factor those in when I would communicate with you. Like, I used to expect you to come up to communicate your feelings and emotions at a place as if none of that trauma existed, because you presented like everything's good. And that's been a learning space for me, to take time to say, wait, hold on. We can't touch everything at one time. I mean, 2020, I think we both spent time really digging in and doing the work for ourselves. And like you said, asking the question, at this point in time, do I want to be married because I love this person as a wife? Or am I just being married out of obligation, meaning like I've fulfilled all these roles for this person for so long, and we family, and what will we do without it? Like, we really spent time there, and in my time spending there, it helped me to consider all things you that I knew, even if you act like they didn't exist.
Right. So, I'll back up a little bit, then I'll come back to that. So, at the age of 5, being in a Jew joint, my dad was shooting dice and, actually knowing that he got shot, in the mouth at 5 years old.
And that's right. It was your dad. See?
The bullet didn't, go through, and they couldn't do the surgery because the bullet was too close to the brain. But, that's how life was, somewhat in the hood. And my mom eventually moved us out of the hood, and we moved into Dickinson. But, so, and that's a lot of trauma too. I had to work through all that, but I ain't worked through that till I was 30, because I really didn't understand it, right? So, it's just relationship period. And that was a relationship, with my mom and my dad. And, again, it was all about finances. So, and to make sure that we were good, that at the end of the day, to make sure we were good. But fast forward to us processing in our 30s, trying to learn how to be in a relationship, trying to learn how to be a husband, with not even knowing who I was myself. And I think with that, man, it's always going to be, it's like oil and water. It's never going to go together. Oil and water never go together. And if you don't know who you are as a person, and you don't even know what you want, or you don't even know what a relationship is about, then now you're in trouble. Now you're in real trouble.
You're going to fail in the relationship area.
So myself, I had to start doing a little bit more research, watching shows like Mike Todd, Relationship Goals, reading books called Boundaries, to kind of know and identify what you was doing to me, because I can't tell you what you're doing to me if I really don't understand it, because that's what I'm used to. If you being judgmental, the first time I don't say nothing. It might take the 4th time, then I'm like, and then when something happened again, now it's an explosion, right? Not an explosion to whereas I'm going to hit you across your head or anything like that. We wasn't violent people, right?
Right.
But explosion is like going out to a bar and, talking to someone and having that secretive relationship with a woman, not necessarily committing adultery, but it's still cheating, because it was secretive that I'm talking to another woman behind your back. And that's who I was explaining everything to. And again, like you said, giving them the cliff notes. So at that point, I think that part of the relationship, and I really didn't understand. So now that kind of balanced me out. Like, okay, that's cool. She talking stuff about me. And this woman, she praising my name, and lifting me up like I'm Superman, right?
But your dirty clothes ain't in her bedroom, though.
That's right. Yeah. So, yeah.
And so, I get that. I mean, The boundaries piece and the therapy, because I can even remember times that early in your therapeutic process when you would come home and be like, yeah, I don't want that therapist. He talk about you like da 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 da. Like
Still defending.
and I was like, the therapist just give you back what you said. But now I ain't saying that he in there like you the worst person in the world. So even when you were in your process, it was hard to conceptualize some of the things that I was doing and saying toward you as being wrong. And I know we talked about it over the years for a time, like not just you, but other people placed me on this pedestal of sorts. Like I could do no wrong and I always had to have this and I'm the smartest and even that's pressure. So it's not the pressure that you may have experienced as an athlete, but to know that people expected me to not ever make a bad decision was pressure, or that felt like I always had the answer to the problem was pressure in itself. That, okay, yeah, I would rise to the occasion, but so many things and steps were missed for me. So at 19, my sister's living with us. So, and even though she was 15, it's still like we were her guardians. You know, I'm dating a man who has 2 kids already. So I'm stepmomming, I'm working 3 jobs, living off campus, holding all of these pressures when at 19, it's so many other things I should have been doing. So then you fast forward in a relationship and of course, after so many extracurricular activities and this, and this, it's like, oh, well, let me go recapture A, B, and C and X, Y, and Z, because then it became a sense of entitlement. Like, oh, I'm owed this, I'm due this, which says nothing about love, but it says about my individuality and the love for me that I hadn't established, because so many people had told me who I was supposed to be, that if any one person whispered something in my ear, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe right now in this point of life at 33, 5, whatever I was, let me try this, and this, which mimicked behavior that looked like what should have happened when I was 18, 19 years old.
Right.
And that felt discombobulating to me. I don't even know what it felt like to you, but to me, I was like, it felt like I was spinning more than I was staying still.
Yeah, I think fast forwarding it to understanding, and as I'm going through the therapeutic process, right, it's about being transparent. And I think once you start communicating, that's probably the best thing that you can do. Because now when you communicating your feelings, you know, and as long as you communicating those feelings, I think you can move forward. And that's what we've been doing, to fast forward now. So I think to where we at right now is probably the best place we've ever been in, you know, out of the 23, 4 years that we've been together, 18 years of marriage.
Look, I'm over here trying to do the math, but you're right, a lot of years, because I agree. I feel like at this point, we took time to really get to know ourselves, what we want, what we didn't want, and we've created a safe space for each other to share those things. And we found out, like, yeah, there's more things. Let's back up. So in 2020, when just everything that could have fell apart seemed like it fell apart, we made a decision to see what would be in our marriage and in our relationship. And as we started exploring that, we discovered there was more things that worked that didn't work when the pressure was to perform was gone, when the obligation was released. It's like, oh, okay, I do want to talk to this dude and tell him da 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 da. Not that, oh, I got to call my husband first because he's my husband. We discovered that. And I think when we discovered that, that propelled the therapeutic process and the transparency and learning what transparency was, right? Because for years I'd be like, oh, well, you ain't honest with me and da-da-da-da-da. And you'd be like, I am honest. You asked me, and when you asked me, I told you. I'm like, but that ain't honesty. I was wrong. That is honesty. Transparency is you telling me without my having to ask. Like, I shouldn't have to go find a question for you to answer for transparency. And I think that's the place that we're in now, that it's just transparency. Like last night when I'm like, you know, it kind of irritated me, not kind of, I said it irritated me when you were on the phone when we had dinner. Like, we at the dinner table with our people, you on the phone. He's like, well, we wasn't doing that. I'm like, it's dinner. And then you said, but hold on, for me, we weren't doing anything. at that moment, and it was okay for me to take a call. And then it's just like it fizzles out. But in the past, I would have needed you to feel like I felt because my feelings were right and your feelings were not valid.
Right. And I think in the past, I may have been like, okay, maybe she was right, and just tried to look at every little thing to figure out how you were right. And for me, it's just like, going through the therapeutic process, I don't have to do that. I shouldn't have to either lower my standards or lower my boundaries or take my little fence down because my beautiful wife want to come across and draw a little line in the sand or whatever.
This is mine.
So I think being transparent and communicating is probably the best thing that could ever happen. And then the other part of it is understanding what we're communicating. It's not just throwing words out there. It's being transparent and also understanding exactly what we're doing and what we're saying to each other. And it's okay if you don't like it, or if it's okay if I don't like it. But the fact that we let it out and we communicate it, and that's the way to move on in a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, we couldn't have gotten to this place without first understanding and being confident in ourselves as individuals. And it's unfortunate when you start a love young that individuality is oftentimes sacrificed for the good of the relationship is what we think at the time. But as we progress in life in that love, we realize not taking time to really develop our individual identity and love for self and care for self, that we end up later, it impacts the relationship negatively because we can't make requests and teach each other how to treat us when we don't even know how we want to be, treated ourselves.
Yeah, no, I think that you definitely got to learn who you are, as a person, and really start appreciating yourself as a person, and knowing, with all the years that we've been together, the biggest thing was knowing that you can do it by yourself. You know what I mean? It's great for us to do it together if we're on the same page and on one accord. But if we're going in two separate directions, it creates a disaster, right? And if you're not communicating, it's going to create confusion. And confusion creates frustration. And now
chaos. And then,
everything blows up, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that, we figured out, I figured out who I was and who I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. And my job was to open the door for you and let you get in the car and ride, right?
And my job was to learn how to ride and not keep grabbing the steering wheel and say you're going the wrong direction in your own life, And I think we've done a really great job of taking trauma, taking drama, taking tragedy, and allowing it to work to our best good. But it only worked to our best good because we chose to take time to do some introspection and both get into therapy and dig up some of those roots from childhood and young adulthood, some of the things that we were, subconsciously taught and consciously taught. So if there was one thing that you could leave or you would want to leave with our audience today, what would it be?
Yeah, one thing I would say is don't overcompensate for your spouse. Do what you know how to do and do it well. And one thing is that I think therapy is probably one of the best things that happened to me, even if you don't even know what to say. Just go in there and start talking, because sometimes it's just good to hear yourself talk. And therapy, it's great to go in there. It's just like a dentist appointment. Go get your mental health check. It's just like a checkup. Whether you go once a year, twice a year, get in there.
All right. Thank you again for coming, love.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kevin shared his journey, which also encompassed my journey, and as it relates to relationship with ourselves and relationship with others. One thing that we really highlighted was boundaries. And so I want to take a little bit of time to explain boundaries a little bit more. And yeah, he said okay, it teaches people how to treat you, but boundaries is exactly that. It's the limitations of where we want others to operate in relation to us, but it's also about having, boundaries within yourself and understanding what you're okay with, what you're not okay with, and how to allow your no to be a complete sentence, how to allow yourself to maneuver in life and change course and direction if and when needed. There's 3 types of boundaries, or boundaries fall in 3 different categories, I should say. You have porous boundaries, you have rigid boundaries, and then you have healthy boundaries. So some of what Kevin shared today supports porous boundaries on his side of not knowing where the line is, or allowing me to stop crossing over boundaries in a relationship with others. And on my side, I had rigid boundaries, which meant everything needed to kind of be the way that I wanted it to be in order for it to be right. And it was hard for me to be accepting of any way or anything different outside of my way of thinking. And then healthy boundaries is what we strive to in a place that we both feel like we've been able to gain in the last year or so, of really understanding and having healthy boundaries. And outside of the 3 types of boundaries, there are 3 categories of boundaries. There are several types of boundaries. There's boundaries around emotions, boundaries around physical space, money, materials, time. So there are several types of boundaries and 3 categories. So do yourself a favor. First and foremost, check in with yourself, start to identify what you need for you, and then work diligently to communicate that with others so that all relationships are filled with love, healthy boundaries, and thriving toward the goals that you've set for it. Have a great one. Join me next week, same time, same place.